Seekers, and welcome back to episode 5 of the Critical Grace podcast. I'm your co host, Bodhi, also known as Bodhi on the Discords, and I am joined tonight by my co host, Ethan, also known as Jabroni Apologist on the Discords.
Greetings.
Ethan, if your cat was a Seeker, what would their legacy be?
Interesting. Well, I've got two cats, but I'm going to
Oh,
go
okay.
with the loud one you might hear in the background of some of these episodes. I'd say it would have something to do with puking. I don't know how you'd mechanically put that into the game, but she really likes to, it's called mowing, where she overgrooms herself and then
Nope.
she barfs up all the hair. It's unfortunate. I promise I didn't do this to her. I got used cats from the used cat dealership. She was 5 when I got her, so she's a little nervous, the poor thing. But she's very sweet. So I'd say the legacy has something to do with healing to represent that she's nice, and it should also have some sort of she can damage herself to shoot projectiles at enemies. She gets a ranged attack to represent the hairballs.
Or like Dire.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be
She
good.
yeah, you got the idea.
I have two cats, and they're both 13, almost 14. I've
Hmm.
had them since I was a wee young child. But for their entire lives, they gorge themselves. I put food in their bowl and water in their fountain, and they just go to town. They scarf
Mm.
it down in minutes. And then, minutes after that, I have a few piles to clean up.
Well, see, okay, real talk. I had that problem up until recently. What you got to do is get him some of those puzzle feeders.
The slow feeders, yeah.
Yeah.
We I'd like to try it. The other issue is that they like to tip their bowls over. And so like their old fountain died about a week or two ago. We got them a new one, and like they'll just splash the water. Like I'll come home from work every day to just puddles on the ground. And they've always done this, especially my female cat, Mittens.
Hmm.
It's just I don't know what their obsession is, but they want their bowls on their sides and all of the contents on the floor.
Couldn't tell you. How would you
Well,
translate that into an ability, though, real
oh,
quick?
I think that it would be something to do with an annoyance in the game. So maybe like a counter spell, but like it doesn't actually cause too much damage. It just like counters it, and then they get the card back in their hand. So like the reversion spell that Landriel has, maybe.
Hmm.
I don't know. Something similar to that. Just enough to make me go like, ugh, but it doesn't really cause like permanent damage. Well, this has absolutely nothing to do with the contents of our episode today. We're talking about Auric. We've
Big.
got Syrath on, and we had a very interesting discussion, I feel like.
Yeah. You kind of got to use your brain. We're out of the realm of the 4 pretty basic, easy to understand casters, and now we're getting all funky with it into the
Yep.
gimmicks and the more complicated setups. So be ready.
Yeah, it's gonna get even more interesting. We're gonna be like critical graves, but we rolled a 2.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a terrible joke. Um, Well, a couple of quick things before we get into the episode. Firstly, literally today, there was a rulebook and FAQ update. We're going to talk about the main thing a few times throughout the episode. So I'm going to let past, or I guess future for you guys, uh, co hosts, describe that. But a couple of other interesting things to note, there's a new mode. So it's a free for all mode for 3 or 4 players called Dominion. Have you played much in like multiplayer games to
I
come
have
up with anything?
I have not. I've from what I've seen, it just gets absolutely crazy. Just
Hmm.
spells are flying everywhere. Everybody's charging everybody. It just gets nuts.
I've played a good bit of 2v2 myself, and when I first got into the game at Adepticon, I had my stuff set up, and I was just letting some other Star Wars Armada players borrow it. And we had this 4-player game going. It was a Morida, a Thundersteps, a think it was a Vorendal and a Sigrith. And one of our future guests, or I guess our past guest, Zog, was playing the Sigrith. And everybody ganged up on him. And so he was like exhausting every possible resource. He had no cards left in his hand. He had like all of the healing spells already played just to keep Sigrith alive. And he ended up having to go for something Armada related. And so I tagged in for one round, drew my two cards, and I like played the units. And when he returned, he was so mad because he now had no ways to prevent the damage. I didn't realize the gravity of the situation.
No, no, no.
Um,
You're not supposed to play the cards. Yeah.
well, yeah. Sigareth got completely bodied. I was forced back into the deployment zone, and yeah, it was rough. But it was a pretty fun experience from the little bit that I got to play, and so I'm excited now that we have some official rules. And of course, there are plenty of other FAQ things that got answered. So if you're interested in that, we have links to those on the big Discord. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're probably inside Discord and probably already know about the FAQ stuff. But if you haven't already, go check it out. The other thing I've got to make a quick announcement for, starting on this episode, we've got a few little bonus additions from our new resident stats gremlin. So we've kind of partnered up with the Malediction Stats app, and Josh has provided some interesting win rate things. And as we continue, the more data that we collect, we'll be able to talk about. So if you haven't already heard about it, whenever you play a game, you can create an account and go on the Malediction Stats app and uh, basically just log your games, and that will provide us more interesting things to talk about. So yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoy, and we'll catch you next time. All right, and we're here with Stuart. We're going to talk about some Auric stuff. Why don't you, to get us started, give us a little rundown? How'd you get into the game? Where do you play?
Originally, when the GameFound campaign started for the game, which was January last year, I came across it in GameFound and I just decided to back it. And although, albeit it was about 9-10 months before we eventually get any of the goods from Loot Studios. And once I got that, just started playing. And about a month later, I became a herald. And I started running a local club, which is based in Kilmarnock, which is about 20 miles south of Glasgow in Scotland. And I've been running weekly events pretty much since the end of November.
Sweet. Have you been an Auric guy for a while? I know it's your profile picture on Discord, but do you play anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, when I started off, I played Syrath, was the first one I went with, and then I leaned into Laundriel for a small section. In fact, I think the first game I played actually was Laundriel, and that game went on for about 3 hours and ended up with 70 odd echo. So it was just insane. And then I decided that kind of gameplay wasn't so much for me as much as I enjoyed that when I did play Magic. I played like a white blue deck when I played that. So I decided rather than actually leaning into a kind of gameplay that I didn't really enjoy, I decided I'd go with like more kind of I've always went with kind of order style decks, paladin type stuff, and not so much in D&D, but certainly in Magic. Like I like a lot of the white decks, or white leaning decks at the very least. But then when I seen Auric and I discovered that uh, apparently he was one of the least played Seekers, and I decided, you know something, I like an underdog, I'll go with that.
But regardless, it's Order of the Shattered Throne.
Yep, I say that's mostly what I played. But outside of that, I've actually played Thundersteps. I've also played Greaser. Not very often, but I mean I've played quite a few of them. Borendal, I played Borendal a few times. Morida, I played once. So I've done a small round, but mostly it's been Auric for the majority of the time. And a lot of it is also because because I'm quite an experienced Magic the Gathering player. I was quite highly ranked in the club that I played in. Um, usually came third, but I was probably about the second best player in the actual club. Whenever I'm playing people within Malediction, usually I'm winning. So I try and actually tame myself back a little bit. So that's one of the reasons why I decided I'll go with Auric. He's not supposed to be one of the better ones. Still usually win, but although weirdly enough on Tabletop Simulator that completely reverses.
Yeah, we'll get into it a little bit later, but Auric's
You
actually been doing pretty good recently.
you heard it here first, folks. He never loses, not once. He's never
oh,
done
I've lost.
it.
And pretty much I've lost every time on Tabletop Simulator, just about.
Well, before we get into kind of your deck and how it works and all that good stuff, Ethan, why don't you give us a rundown on some lore?
Gladly. So, Auric Evenhand is a Volkir, who are sort of the dwarf troll hybrids of this setting. They're big, they're bulky, they're strong, they got big, beautiful beards, and they eventually turn to stone when they get old. They were created by the everlasting known as Guldrin, who was, probably just like them, but a lot bigger and more powerful. And he was, honestly, probably one of the more chill everlasting out there. He was commissioned by the Triumvirate to create the walls of the great city where the malediction is contained. Back when it was like their nice crown jewel capital city, of course. So to do this, he created the Volkir in the same way that most of the current races in this setting were basically custom jobs by this god or that god. But once again, especially by the standards of the setting, he was a pretty good dad. He taught them all the stuff. He taught them how to be masons, how to make stuff. And the first thing he had them do was build their own city called Midrasil, where they would all live. And when the job was done, he liked them so much, he made his favorite one king, and he set him loose. And of course, he died like everybody else during the war. It was rough. But anyway, many, many, many generations later, Auric was actually born to a trading family. However, one day, when his family was in caravan, taking goods to and from, they were attacked by a raiding party of the Primal Blood. Everybody was surprised when Auric's dad pulled this weird, red, fancy-looking hammer out from somewhere and did an excellent job defending his family and took many of the attackers with him before he, in turn, was defeated. It turns out that the seemingly random group of merchants had an ancestral legacy, which is, of course, called the Will of the Forge. It's the big, scary hammer that Auric wields. He was taken in by the Order, and he did a bunch of research, and he basically found out, shock of all shocks, his family were actually royalty. They traced back to the kings of Midrasil that were put in place by their god. And this crazy hammer that he's got, not only will it listen to him because he's from the royal blood, but it's actually not complete. It's a legacy in two parts. Traditionally, the king of Midrasil would have a crazy cool, magical, steampunk-looking arm called Caldera's Fist. Eventually, he took a pilgrimage to fallen Volkir. It's a city in ruins now, a horrible plague that seems to have been created by the Primal Blood, ripped through and killed a bunch of them and sent the rest of them into diaspora. Just ripped through the city, but he made his way through the city, which probably took, means that guy's pretty tough. He didn't fall to disease. And he essentially ripped his own arm off and replaced it with the Calderan Fist. So now he's got the whole kit and caboodle, and it's an amazingly powerful relic. It's more actually designed for creation than it is for destruction, but it seems to be in tune with whatever would be best for the Volkir people, which Auric now believes. He's like, well, I'm the king. I'm descendant of the kings. I'm the last man standing. I am like the government and exile of my people. And at the moment, that means he helps out the Order of the Shattered Throne. The other notable thing about him is that he basically went on a rampage, just like destroying various warbands of the Primal Blood. However, because he's technically part of the Order, he has to accept their surrenders. something that he is not actually happy about. He would rather just kill them all. But Volcurists get angry if you kill people who want to convert, even if it's at knife point. So now he's got a bunch of primal blood expats basically running around with him, and he's essentially using them as tools. He does not hold them in high regard at all. It's kind of implied he's, making sure that they die heroic deaths on the front lines so that he doesn't have to look at them anymore. And opinions are pretty divided on him. Some people, especially his own people, think he's this prodigal son who's going to lead them and unite them and reforge their city. And other people notice that he's just kind of crazy and unhinged sometimes, and he's really, really violent and good at it. But he's trying to basically gather power so that he can forge a new nation for the Volkir. And at the moment, he's united with the Order of the Shattered Throne. After all, the Volkir did historically get along very well with the Triumvirate. However, it is noted that these goals aren't always in alignment, and his loyalty to them is really only contingent on their current military alliance. So yeah.
All right. Well, as always, if you enjoy any of the fancy lore stuff, I can't recommend the Into the Malediction podcast enough. They do a great job of running through all of the fascinating politics and whatnot. But that's not what we're here to do today. We're here to talk about how to play Auric. So I'm just going to start off by reading his Seeker card. We've got a 10 cost unit Seeker Volkir. He's got an accuracy of 4, a power of 5 on a hit and 3 on a graze, a range of 0, a speed of 5, a defense of 13, a health of 20, and he's got 3 abilities. First up is Reforge. For 2 action points, you can choose an item of this unit's rank or lower from your discard pile, play and equip it to an ally you own within 6 inches without spending any echo, and this provokes retaliation. And then we've got Man at Arms. This unit can equip an extra item and counterattack. Whenever a hit is scored against this unit, it may retaliate after the damage resolves. So, Stuart, why don't you kind of tell us what's important about the character card here?
The main thing that you have with Auric when you're comparing them against other Seekers is the counterattack. There aren't many Seekers that have the ability to hit back. You've got Londriel has got Riposte, but if you're fighting another Seeker, generally you're going to get hit. So as a result of that, that means it can actually become tougher than Thundersteps. It can become tougher than Vorendal when it comes to the damage. Because if you get to move in and do 2 attacks, for example, so if it's 2 attacks in and 2 attacks out, you can actually land and get like just basic 10 damage. But if you're then getting attacked by your opponent, that's an additional 5 damage potentially each time they hit you. So you can actually deal out 20 damage over 4 attacks, either in or out, as long as your opponent hits you.
That's pretty gnarly. I'd also like to give a special shout out to his weird Reforge ability, which, doesn't come up super often sometimes, but you are going to have those kind of lulls in combat where it's not a good idea to throw him in. He doesn't really have anything to do. But, bam, now somebody has, a horned helmet or a hunter's bow because you could just do that.
That's going to become probably more important, especially now with the rule changes with regards to the mastery. So that now that you no longer get mastery from destroying equipment, that means that Reforge actually becomes a lot more value because each time you do it, you're also going to draw a card.
Yup.
One of the main advantages that you have and it's more so much with the legacy rather than the Oryx card itself, is that with Will of the Forge, each time you're playing equipment, you're getting to draw the additional card, which gives you a lot of card advantage that even other Seekers that have the card advantage, you don't have this benefit that you can pretty much call upon at will. As long as you've got equipment in hand, you'll be able to play that equipment and you can cycle the card back in. So one of the detriments of using equipment when you're using equipment is that you're losing 2 cards whenever you're doing it, but you're getting that back. the echo is also like another sum game as well, because ultimately any echo you spend, you are going to get back when that equipment gets destroyed. So you're never going to be losing echo as a result of it over the game, certainly. But it's always going to be an advantage. Whereas for other seekers, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's only going to get better. For context, to date this particular episode a little bit, literally like early today, they announced the rule changes, the new like errata that includes that items no longer give your opponent mastery when they're destroyed, which is great for everybody, but especially for Auric. Auric stocks up.
Yeah, it was pure coincidence that we decided to record this today, and I'm glad that it ended up working out like this. I'm sure that this change is going to be referenced multiple times throughout the episode. Auric also has, because he's at 20 health, the only other Seeker with that much health is Thundersteps. So he's pretty durable too. And 13 defense is not much to scoff at.
You
Uh,
don't you don't want the actual your opponent actually grazing you though. You want to be
yeah,
them to hit you so you can hit them back. So you don't want to be, unless they're actually hitting really hard. So you'd like maybe getting like something like a Thundersteps charge coming in at you. But that's being in the order that actually helps, because you've got things like knights to mitigate the damage, two stone exemplars, they can provide protection. You've also got the healing spells from the order, as well as the access to healing from units like Spirit Shaman and also the Valkyrie's Priest.
yeah. So overall, I mean, he's got a pretty durable kit. He's not one of the easier Seekers to take down. Like, he doesn't have any inbuilt protection. But like you just mentioned, the cards that he's going to want to play in his deck make him pretty durable. But let's talk about that legacy. We've already kind of mentioned a few things about it, but we've got Will of the Forge. It's going to give you a starting echo of 20. And we've got two effects here. We've got Hammer Half's Heritage. Whenever you play an item, you may draw a card, and whenever an item you own is destroyed, gain echo equal to its cost. And Caldera's Fist. While an ally you own is performing attacks or being attacked, you may destroy an item equipped to it, and if you do, you may choose to either deal 2 extra damage or the attack deals 2 fewer damage. So, whenever you're making an attack, I would assume that generally you would want to increase that damage, whereas whenever you're being attacked, I would assume that you would want to reduce the damage. You mentioned
Not
how we
always. I'll sort of jump in there. There are
yeah,
times
I,
where
I
you'd
wanted
actually do it
to
the other way around.
I wanted to lead into that because there's some interesting tech that you can do. But yeah, take it away.
I mean, as an example, if somebody, for example, uses something like Shift and Winds, and then decides to target one of your own units, you can now turn around and, like, if you're doing something like Rebound and Throw, you can now destroy your own equipment to prevent not only the damage from the bonus you might get from that equipment, but also to reduce the damage by 2, which does mitigate off the +2 damage you get from Rebound and Throw. So if you end up hitting yourself with it, you can actually prevent that damage. Similarly, you can also, if you do 2 damage into Syrath, and Syrath decides to do something like, I want to trigger Divine Retribution, you can turn around and destroy the equipment, take the -2, and prevent the retribution because there is no damage to mitigate.
Yeah, it's like weirdly like there's a lot of techs for this legacy. I would say that it does require quite a bit of setup. It doesn't just kind of like, give you something by default or give you a resource you can always tap into. The items do need to be on the board or in your hand for you to get the benefit of it. And, that shouldn't be a problem with Auric, but there might be times where you're like, dang it, I really can't do anything with this right now. Auric does take a bit of setup. I'd say that's kind of one of the main things about him, is you got to have your stuff ready.
Your main units will generally tend to have equipment. I mean, I'm always sort of, for example, if I see scout boots, for example, I'll put them on the crossbowman, because the crossbowmen you can end up pushing through 7 damage, but they're also one of the best targets for one of the spells we'll cover later on, is Rebound and Throw. See, because the amount of damage you can end up doing from that is quite a lot.
Nice.
Any other thoughts on either the Seeker card itself or the Legacy card before we move on to some terrain?
Well, I mean, the Seeker card itself, I mean, one of the things that you can actually also do with this is that if you are if you're in a situation where you're maybe a little bit low in echo and there's a spell you want to cast, or there's a unit that you're not going to be able to play next turn, you can turn around and you can use your equipment, destroy it, and take the additional 2 damage or reduce it by 2 to get the echo back from it. And that would then open up a Reforge, for example, or if you've got other equipment in hand, it allows you to play that equipment because you're always going to be able to cycle in and out equipment, which means that you can turn around and get that echo back, at least temporarily, to let you do that spell. So if you're out of echo, it's something that can actually be used in the clutch to get you more echo back.
That's
Okay.
really cool. And once again, like the downside of it used to be that you were giving your opponent victory points in little drips and drabs over the course of the game while using it. But that's no longer the case. And that's probably going to reframe a lot of his strategies.
Definitely,
All
for
right.
sure. It's definitely going to make a massive difference. I mean, it limited me to about 5 pieces of equipment that on a standard deck is kind of where my sweet spot, 5 or 6 pieces of equipment, which is going to be over the game. That's potentially 12 mastery for your opponent.
No more points for you.
Yep, I'm going to be glad of that.
So
I,
moving into terrain, for each of the 4 terrain pieces that are currently in the game, there were no games recorded with Noxious Flesh Gardens and a 50% win rate with Death Shroud Mire. However, the 2 main ones that are used are Asterian Pathways and Starcast Halls. So Asterian Pathways has a 58.33% win rate, and Starcast Halls has a 57.14% win rate. And so let me read both of those out. Asterian Pathways has the boosting ability, so units on this terrain performing actions will get +2 to their speed. And Starcast Halls has Arcane. During the activation of an ally you own, channels you play cost 1 fewer echo while that ally is standing on this terrain. So, Stuart, what are your opinions on the terrain choices here?
I would say that there's a valid choice for 3. I mean, although I would say that probably the Shrouds, or certainly the Shroud, the Maya, is the one that you're least likely to see. It's still a viable one to do because you're getting a lot of cover out of that, and that's one of the things that Auric can be weak against. Is it can be weak against ranged attacks, because it doesn't have a huge amount of, unless you lean into it, that it doesn't have a lot of ranged attack going out of the way. But moving out uh, into the equipment, you've got Shadow Shroud, which lets you also get ambush, which allows you to deploy in the terrain. You also have access to the Farsight Ambusher, so you do have natively 1 unit plus equipment that can allow you to get ambush to be able to deploy, for example, Auric directly onto a unit or a Staris Battlemaster, so you can go straight into an onslaught. So those do work on there, but they are kind of niche in that respect. But they do allow you to block line of sight from ranged attacks, so that helps in that respect. Starcast Halls is probably the one I would choose as my favourite because the amount of channels that you have from both the order side and from the dual coloured spells and also primal are huge. I mean, you get things like Trial of Stone, you've got Rebound and Throw, Call to Arms. All of the equipment based spells are all channels. So these all lean into playing Starcast Halls because you'll save echo over the game because of the amount of channels that you might play. Additionally to that, you've got the Starring Pathways, which just gives you the bonus in movement. So if you're playing into, it depends on how you're leaning into it. Because I've played decks, for example, where it's just a pure aggro deck. I've maybe only got 4 spells. In that case, Astarian Pathways becomes the must take. But if you're using something like eight channels, then it's Starcast Halls becomes the better option.
yeah, I'd also say that, like, we'll get into this more. I play Auric pretty defensively. and I just don't want my opponent to have access to the speed bonus if I can help it. I prefer to have the channels, and I don't want my opponent getting closer to me faster than I would like.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I kind of feel like this is one of those cases where, and Starcast Halls has a real, like, numerical value that it brings to the game. And I mean, with any excuse, enough channels to make it worth it, I feel like I'm putting Starcast Halls into my decks. Whereas Asterion Pathways, it can definitely help with some of the slower seekers. And like we've talked about it in some of our other episodes, but I don't know. I'm kind of with you guys. I think Starcast is where it's at.
The only thing I would say about Starcast is that it can lead into your opponent's better match. Like the weaker matchups you're likely to get are ones where you're actually coming up against spell units. Or spell seekers, sorry, like people like Pollinor, maybe Morida, Ingor. So those kind of units will get a lot of benefit from your own terrain in that situation, and sometimes that's where you maybe better playing into like the Astarian pathways rather than playing into the Starcast halls. But you can't just, I mean, it's not like you can side deck a piece of terrain, so it's one or the other. So really, it's down to really, I think it comes down to how many channels are you playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're always going to be giving your opponent something with the terrain. That's kind of the give and the take, you know?
In general, though, I think that the seekers that want to have Starcast Halls kind of already do. And so, like, if you're playing against a Pollinor and they're, trying to get onto your Starcast Halls because that's their only way to get cost reduction, I think that Pollinor is probably doing something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to bring their own most of the time.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk some general strategy here. So in this section, we like to go over kind of what the deck wants to do, maybe some key pieces, and kind of an overall guide for, from terrain placement and husk placement all the way to getting 40 mastery. How do we play Auric?
Ultimately, when it comes to the terrain, generally I'm looking to do almost a diamond formation where I can with the terrain. You're never going to be able to do that because your opponent's going to position the terrain in such a way that you're not going to be able to take advantage of it. But you want to be placing your terrain within sort of 5 inches of either deployment. So that means you're moving slightly back from centre or forward from centre, depending on where you're positioning it, so that you're able to get to that piece of terrain from both sides. So you don't end up sort of leaning to one side or the other. And similarly with the husks, you want to try and put them in that same kind of diamond formation, to try and keep it from leaning into becoming too easy for units to get to. Because you want to at least, if you can get to two husks in turn one, that gives you a huge advantage, especially if you can pull the second unit back into your own sort of protection bubble, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair assessment. There's only so many places the terrain can go a lot of the time. Once we get the first couple pieces down, things get a lot more narrow pretty quickly too. It's a little frustrating, honestly. I'd like to get more crazy and creative with it.
I have to agree with him. So I usually get my large terrain and I'll put it, as I say, round about the middle, about halfway between the centre and the edge of the board. And then with the medium terrain, I'm taking it to one side or the other to actually sort of put in a place where I can shoot from units. So I can put like a crossbowman in there. I very often side deck Secticar. And quite often, I want to put him in a position where he can sort of throw bombs out of the way, especially if he's got a horned helmet on him, because then you can really mess with the position of where that bomb's going to land, and then try and capture units. So somebody that thinks they're safe from being getting a bombardment, if they get pushed back with a horned helmet, then you might actually push them back into other units and catch them with splash damage.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to terrain, I'm just trying to maximize my ability. Like if I get the worst corner possible, I still have access to my Starcast. So it often just turns into a triangle for me. Um, but you mentioned earlier, Syrath, that you run Auric as kind of like a middle range seeker. Why don't you talk a bit about that?
I mean, ultimately, yeah, guys. I mean, one of the main things that you've got, and especially when you lean into the legacy, is that with Auric, there's a kind of concept within Magic the Gathering, for example, of card advantage, and it's card advantage that you're playing for. You're not playing for like doing flashy damage. You're looking for like incremental increases by drawing more cards than your opponent has. So, as an example, if you play something like Call to Arms, it might not seem like much. You've got Call to Arms, cost you 2 points, or if you cast it on Starcast, 1 point, and you can go and shoot it out a piece of equipment. You get that piece of equipment on board. That's you got one card. You've thinned out your deck by 2 cards as a result of it, and you've also then drawn another card after you do that. So you've now got 3 cards for that one spell being cast. Now, there's not many cards in the game that allow you to do that, and if they are, they're usually gold. So things like Rippling Potential. So something like Call to Arms can actually work in much the same way as Rippling Potential does, because it gets you 3 cards out of your deck, which thins your deck and means that you've got a much higher chance of drawing into the cards that you really need, because you're able to pull the cards out because of this card advantage, and that's what you're leaning into with this legacy, and also some of the spells that you're getting advantage of, things like Trial of Stone, Choice of Brutality, all of these ones that allow you to get extra cards out.
Yeah, and you have access to both priests and totems with your colors. So it's not just that you're going to have the extra cards, but if you get a little lucky with your draws, you're going to have the echo to play pretty much anything you might pull. Uh, my general strategy with Auric is I don't think it's actually too different than yours, but I'm like very very defensive with him. I think he has the tools to make the opponent come to him and just kind of sit in a corner,
Oh,
like
totally. Yeah, you can
which
go both ways.
yeah. And like if I can get a couple of course, if you get a couple of like totems out, they stop even needing anybody to be around them. They can just, vibe off of each other in the back corner and get you all your echo. But I think that Auric, yeah, he does have the opportunity. If you see an opportunity as Auric, I think you can rush out and beat somebody down. And you do have access to the red action cards, stuff like Adrenaline Rush, and you also have Valor's Command, which is just like a cheaper half an Adrenaline Rush. You do have a lot of options for additional attacks and additional tempo. The main thing I think is that you got to remember that you are going to be at a bit of a disadvantage when the game starts, because you are like a dual faction seeker. You're going to have less echo, something you can fix pretty quick if you get the right draws, but you can't just be full aggro, and you might not be bringing Auric out to a little later.
I think that a
Especially,
lot of people do underestimate the primal totems, because I've seen a lot of people who think that if you've got the choice between primal totems and Valkyrie's priest, you want to play the priest. But the primal totems actually pay for themselves so quickly, that if you sit one down, you're effectively getting your money back or your echo back from it immediately. I remember listening to a previous podcast with Victor Strake, and he pointed out, like, you've got to think of them as spells, though. You don't think of them as units, because you're not going to be using them to activate, to do attacks, to do anything else. And that actually leans into the fact that it's like you're always going to be playing twice with them. So you only need one other unit to actually get 2 echo per round off it. And if you can get 2 other units, then you're actually talking about getting the full 3 prey each turn, or each activation, sorry. And if you can get 2 sitting together, as you said, that's you getting 4 echo per turn.
mm-hmm. It's really good, and I think people also underestimate the rally one. Just getting that +1 to hit, especially if you are playing defensive and you are kind of backed into a corner. That +1 comes in handy more often than you might think. That's a cool 5%. That's all I'm going to say.
And as well as that, people tend to ignore it and not try and hit it, which is a mistake
Mm-hmm.
by any means, because as well as doing that, it also pads out your activations, which means that you can actually push your own activations till after. So if you out activate your opponent, you're getting a lot of activations that are not getting responded to.
The last game that I won against an Auric is because I like very kind of recklessly dove in and killed a totem in his deployment zone in like round 2. It was a Zog, shout out to Zog. But it's like that really kind of put me out of position, but that kept his Auric from coming in for like 2 or 3 rounds. Like it was actually the correct, like getting those batteries up early can be like so decisive.
I mean, there is still an advantage to having the priest, and one of those is that one of the things that you are weak on is you don't have a lot of healing. Unlike
Mhm.
Sigurth, where you've got like masses of spells and you've got the units to do that. But you do, however, have access to Spirit Shaman and you do have the Priest. So if you're actually playing into something like Polynor, which can really do a lot of burst damage. In fact, I lost the game in pretty much, I think, 4 activations, I think it was, or 5 activations. And it was if I'd had the priests and the shaman available both, I probably could have actually maybe kept myself alive until I could get the bigger units on board.
Mhm. Yeah, you got to scale with him.
Well, without jumping too far ahead, I want to add in some notes for our resident stats gremlin. Auric has a 50% win rate in all tournament data collected so far. Also, he has an impressive 61.11% win rate in our top rated tournaments, which are ones with highly competitive players and list submission is mandatory. So, stuff like our monthly TTS tournaments. Also, we have the average mastery for a win at 45 and the average mastery for a loss at 16.9. So it looks like Auric isn't able to kind of do the farming strategy that we see with Laundrill, where you wait until you have like 39 mastery and then pick up 3 husks. Um, Usually, when he's winning, he's just kind of scraping in. Do you guys have any points on that?
He doesn't have a lot of mobility options. That's true, unless you're spending
Yeah.
like an adrenaline rush on something, which I honestly wouldn't do most of the time. It's always nice to be able to get 2 relics, but I think Auric can turn it around from getting 1 relic and your opponent like maybe getting 2 and then contesting the other one. But yeah, I'd say that he isn't super flashy. It's like Stuart was saying. He's more about incremental gains, and like that's probably not going to change for the last round. You're not looking for a round where you've really teed everything up and then you blow up your opponent's entire army. You're probably just going to kill something big, maybe 2 things, and then pick up a husk, and then the game will end.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I'd agree with. I mean, they say the incremental advantage that you build up over the game gets you over the finish line, and you will usually end up very rarely getting over 50, but it's usually a win in between 40 and 50. Is what's going to get you. And it's saying it's mainly because, as you say, you're just taking out a unit that's got a husk, and then you can claim it at the end of the game, or you're winning because you've defeated units. Then you're never going to get a lot of points end of game by defeating units. So you're only going to get like just over the finish line. So you're usually in 44, 45 if you kill an elite, or just over if you kill a basic.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair point. He's an honest seeker, you know. There's more I could say for some of them out there.
Oh, he's Volkir. What do you expect?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of our card choices. So the way that we divide this section up is we have our lovely guests pick a card in each basic, elite, and unique categories. And then we have our host choices, which historically has just been Ethan. Um, a lot of that is because I don't play much Order of the Shattered Thread, but when we get into some other seekers, I will have more input.
I've been subjecting
However,
myself. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I've been generally subjecting myself to several games as whatever seeker's up next. So uh, it yields some insights, but I'm always afraid I'm going to have some blind spots compared to somebody who's been like dyed in the wool with whoever it is.
Well, that's why we pull random people off the street. And that's why I just ask the questions, because I do not play all of these seekers very often. But anyway, Stuart, your choice for a basic unit is the Tarek Beast. I'm sure that we will hear about this guy in plenty of episodes to follow, as we did with Thundersteps. But he is a 2-cost unit beast. He's got an accuracy of 2, a power of 3 on a hit, 1 on a graze, a range of 0, speed of 10, defense of 11, health of 10, swarm 1. This unit gets +1 power on attacks against enemies that are engaged with another ally, and clumsy. This unit cannot equip attachments. Why is the Tarek Beast your pick for the best basic card?
Yeah, it's got clumsy. It can't even pick up attachments. What's going
Yeah,
on
you
here?
can't equip it with things. This is the equipment deck. What are you talking about?
The ultimately with Tarek Beasts, they are there for like messing up your opponent. You've got 20 inches of movement, which will get you well across the board. You get them into places where they become roadblocks, where you can get them into contest relics. It's ultimately for a 2-cost unit. You're not. I appreciate you're not going to put equipment on it. That's not something. That's not what it's there for. It's there to prevent, like, to help give you the reach to be able to contest relics that because you're quite a slow moving seeker. As a result of that, you need something that's actually relatively fast that can get in and can contest relics, can also get in and get into the face of other opponents. One of the other pieces of equipment that you'll see me use is Scoundrel's Blade, which triggers off a swarm. Now, that gives perfect synergy with the likes of the Tarot Beast because you can get both units in, both get the +1, and both take advantage of that. So if you can get a Tarot Beast in, or you can get a Tarot Beast even close, as an example, if you can actually stop them an inch away from another unit in the last activation of the turn, and then you can deploy Auric or an Astaris Battlemaster directly onto your opponent with equipment in hand, and then bring the Tarek Beast in. Then you've got the additional advantage of Swarm as well as the being able to deploy your unit exactly where you want to, which is perfect. If you end up with two units that like facing off over a relic, over a husk, sorry, then what you can end up doing is you can actually then put Auric on either side of that husk, or put a Astaris Battlemaster or any other unit that's a good offensive unit.
Yep, it's a lot of the same stuff that makes any unit in this niche good, like a gargoyle or a pig. You get it up there, it disrupts stuff, and it stays around often just long enough to put something else down that's going to be a bigger threat.
Yeah, as it turns out, in a game where positioning matters, being fast is very strong.
It's almost like positioning is historically the strongest thing in any tabletop game.
Right? Well, let's talk about something that has no positioning ability whatsoever. This is a primal totem, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but it is a 2-cost unit construct. It has an accuracy of dash, a power of dash, a range of dash, a move of dash. Therefore, none of those. A defense of 8 and a health of 8. And we've got a whopping 4 abilities. So Pray 3 for 1 action point. For each other ally you own within 6 inches, gain 1 echo, up to 3 echo per activation, and this provokes retaliation. Inspire 1, while other allies are within 6 inches, they get +1 accuracy. And Rally, while engaged, this unit can still call reinforcements. And finally, Clumsy. This unit cannot equip attachments.
Another
So,
clumsy unit.
yeah. You mentioned a few important things about the Primal Totem. Is there anything else that you want to add onto it?
I guess, yeah, I kind of covered the basics already. It's you plop it down, it generates echo every round. It's going to pay for itself generally within the first time you use it. If you can get a couple units around them, if you get 2 or even 3 of them next to each other, they do even more of that. I will say there are also activations like Stuart was mentioning that like Drake said, they are kind of like spells, sometimes a little more than units. But if you're looking to out-activate somebody, they are very handy for that. And if you have to play kind of a more totally defensive playstyle, like I tend to do with Auric, that can be a cool thing. Is you're like, well, we're even except for this one totem, but because I can stand here and pray, you have to throw something in at the end of the round, and I can smack it. The rally is pretty good, just that +1. If you can't get a Warfront priest out who has an even better buff, I'd say it's the next best thing. And it doesn't come up super often, but the fact that you can deploy units around it, even when it's engaged, can be pretty cool.
Very often, I think that goes under noticed by a lot of people, because you can actually, if you plan, if as an example, if you've got one primal totem in your hand, you might not want to play it turn 1. You may want to play it turn 2. That actually gives you a deployment halfway up the board,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually then lets you effectively rally around the flag. So you can actually turn around and get the battle moving that little bit closer. And if you end up having to deploy something, rather than deploying it back in your deployment zone because everything else is engaged, then your primal totem's exactly the best place to put it. And they are often overlooked by your opponent because they're not gonna prioritize taking that out over something else. Again, that's a mistake. You want to take this out as soon as you can. Don't ignore it. It's an activation, as you said, and if you can out activate your opponent, you can turn around and you can take advantage of that.
Yep. They're really solid little pieces.
And having access to 2 2-point units and 2 3-point units, because you've got the Citadel Crossbowman and the Paxos Gorehorn are available as well, you can get a lot of activations on the board very quickly. One of the decks I built in the past was pretty much a 21 unit, like mostly units plus a small amount of equipment and about 3 spells, and I had a lot of success with that.
You could just flood the board if you play your cards right. Yeah. Which is
It's
not
like,
something like outside of Ingor, maybe. That's often not something that people expect of a dual faction. Because they're like, oh, he starts with 20. It'll be fine. It'll be whatever. He'll scale up pretty slowly. And you're like, nope, here I come. Round 2.
5 units turn 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, moving into some elite cards, Stuart, you have a few honorable mentions in Trial of Stone and Rush of Salvation. I'll let you touch on those if you want, but the main selection that you've got is Rebounding Throw. So this is a channel spell that says an ally equipped with an item performs a ranged attack with +2 power against an enemy within 6 inches. After resolving the attack, return the equipped item to its owner's hand.
What's up with
Oh,
that? That's weird.
a lot of I mean, again, I think this is also underlooked, especially by some of the top players. If you could turn around and I would say, like, if you could cast a 1 echo spell that does as much damage as an unmake, or nearly as much damage as an unmake, and you can actually get more echo off of using that than you spent on casting it. Most people would think that's crazy. Not only would you expect that to be a unique, but it's actually in this case it's an elite. So you get 2 of them in your deck. There are plenty of ways to set this up. So as an example, you can set it up with Auric. Auric's pretty much always going to be on the board. So if you've got Auric that has Scout Boots, for example, you can turn around and you can use Rebound and Throw as an out of activation attack. So if you're outside of range, or even if you've got Boots of Celerity, for example, where you're not going to get retaliation, you can turn around and drop the Rebound and Throw, and you can get 9 damage off of that. All you need to do is just cast a spell. You get +2 damage, that brings it up to 7. And then if you've also got if you've got the the boots and you destroy them, then that takes it up to 9 damage. So that's 9 damage straight off the back, and you get 2 echo back from it. So if you cast that while you're in Starcast Halls, it costs you 1 echo, you get 2 echo back, and you just did 9 damage. If that doesn't compare with Unmake, I don't know what doesn't.
It's pretty dang good. It's like very unique and flavorful too for being. It's like one of the few yellow-red cards. It's like very specific to Auric. And it kind of, it's neat. It's like, and he does whatever else he's doing, and he chucks an axe at you too.
Yeah. And
Um,
I just love it because I just love explaining it as I've just thrown my boots at you.
and I will say that like it is after resolving the attack, return the equipped item. So for the attack itself, you do, like, if you have the horned helmet on you, that's a +3 to the damage.
Oh, not if you destroy it though. Just to point out,
Oh,
if you destroy
yeah,
the
yeah.
equipment, you don't get the additional damage. But
Right.
boots, it doesn't matter because the only thing you would lose at that point is hit and run. Sometimes you want to keep the hit and run because it's like, and you might want to get the card coming back to your hand. You're doing less damage then. You're only doing 7 damage. But if you do it with the horned helmet, you're going to get 8.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where you kind of have to pick, because if you blow it up, that has its own disadvantages, but you do get the echo back. It's like I'd say it's like a toolkit almost. Like you've got a few branching paths that you can do with this, based on the item and the situation and how much you care about echo versus card draw versus having the item back to use again. It's really versatile.
I especially like it because you can choose after you decide, after you know whether it's a hit or a miss or a hit or a grace.
Mhm.
Sorry. Because you can actually turn around and probably one of the most common things you'll hear me say whenever I'm playing at my local events is, how much health has he got left now? And if it's 1 or 2,
Mhm.
bye bye.
I never would have expected to learn about a dwarf having the ability to throw a chunk play.
Well, he is a pretty big dwarf.
Yeah, that's true.
Weirdly enough, I mean, I don't know if you'll know this, but they actually they are more like the traditional dwarfs, which is
Yeah,
what you see in like the Avengers, for example.
spirits of the earth, that sort of thing, craftsmen, that being kind of their main thing, not so much the specific Tolkien look. They're pre-Tolkien dwarves, Santa.
Yeah, pretty much. Say especially, I mean, but having said that, they weren't really that defined in myth until you had it was, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was something from about 17th or 18th century, but they were long. Dwarves existed long before that in myth, but they were only defined like 400 or 500 years after they first came sort of appeared. But
Yeah,
so it was, and ultimately it's Tolkien that's predominantly sort of defined what elves and things like that look like.
we live in his shadow. It's kind of like if you look back in history, there's gnomes a lot older than like the garden gnome variety. That's actually a lot sooner than you thought it was. But anyway,
That aside,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Ethan, for your elite card selection, you also had a little honorable mention of Warfront Commander,
Hmm.
but you picked that last week, so we're going to talk about Horned Helmet.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of games in with him. So, like I mentioned, he was my
Let me let
pick.
me let me read off what it does real
Oh,
fast.
go ahead.
So this is an attachment item, cost 2, and the unit gains +1 power and knockback 4. So whenever this unit scores a hit, it may push the defender up to 4 inches.
Yep.
All right, go ahead.
So, like, I will say, honorable mention for the Warfront Commander. He was my pick for Syrath. He's amazing. If you're turtling, his rally is really good. Telling big, strong, chunky units to shoot more or punch more is always good. He's still great. However, I figured we'd get into the items a little bit, considering the subject matter. And this is the Horned Helmet. It's kind of the bread and butter. I think it's kind of the most generically powerful item in the game. It gives whoever is holding it just +1 damage flatly. And as Stuart has mentioned before, that's going to come out every time unless you specifically get a critical graze. You're just going to get a +1. And the knockback, it doesn't come up as much, but it can be really useful, especially if you're trying to reposition your opponents, keep them from getting the classic activate and double hit, like if you're already engaged. You can do a lot of stuff with this. And I personally I really like the Feral Gauntlets, but Stuart was just telling me a little bit before, like Feral Gauntlets can be cool, and if you have both of them, like on somebody with whatchamacallit, Man at Arms, it can be crazy. But the Feral Gauntlets give you things when you hit, whereas the Horde Helmet just gives you things when you swing. So it's a lot more reliable in that case. Not to mention, like we do have the Battle Master who can do the 3-hit combo, and if you're really lucky with the Battle Master, like you hit a couple times, then you hit the third time, and then you push them away, and now they can't get 2 swings on you. Say you're fighting something big and scary, you're fighting a Blood Feast Raptor or something, and you're like, no, Blood Feast Raptor, you only get to swing at me once. Eh.
It also allows you to do a rebound and throw immediately afterwards.
Yup. Which is great. You just swing, 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 push, and then thwack. That's very flavorful. Once again, a big dwarf guy beating the crud out of you, smacking you away, and then throwing an axe at your head. It's good stuff.
That also leans into the Trial of Stone as well, because one of the things you can do with Trial of Stone is you can trigger that off, and if you've got the horned helmet and then you push your opponent away, he doesn't get to attack you.
He doesn't
Then
get it.
you've done. You get to draw the card. That's game over for that. It's like you've
Right.
done the most damage, and there's no comeback.
No, that's excellent. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I'm gonna add Trial of Stone to my deck. I want to see if I can get away with this.
It's also, I mean, as I say, with the counter attack that you get from Auric, it's one of the it's a fantastic combo because if you actually have to, let's say you double move to get into engagement with somebody, like you might be in a charge, it might be just a double move. It doesn't really matter. You can then do a Trial of Stone either in your own turn or your own activation or in somebody else's activation to get 2 more attacks out because you get to attack and hit them. If they then hit you, you can get to attack twice. So that's another 10 damage or 12 damage. You've got a horned helmet, or if you've got the Reaper's Edge, that's actually potentially 16 damage just from those 2 attacks. That's
Yeah,
enough to kill most people.
Auric can really spike when he has the right stuff. He does, as I mentioned, require a bit of setup. You need to have your items out. But when he's got him, he can hit you like harder than almost anybody else. Like he's up there with Thundersteps for raw damage. And unlike Thundersteps, I think he has quite a bit more sustain on top of that if you can get his stuff going.
Well, moving into some of our unique cards. First up, we've got Choice of Brutality. This is a 3-cost channel spell. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck, add 1 to your hand, and banish the other. Deal damage to an enemy equal to the cost of the banished card.
Yep. So, to me, this is one of the best uniques that you can get within Primal, full stop. Number one, especially if you're using Sarcast Halls, because it's only going to cost you 2 Echo. But then you're going to get to draw 2 cards, one of which you're going to get to keep. So that's whichever one you want to keep. But the other one you're going to get to cause the damage with an Echo. So if you're doing 2 Echo and you draw, like most units are going to be at least 4 Echo. Let's say you're going to, unless you draw a spell, if you draw a unit, it's going to be 4 Echo and you're going to do 4 damage. So that's two cost, 4 Echo, 4 damage from the 4 Echo unit or whichever you get rid of, and you're getting another card out of it. So that to me is a win-win. It also sort of goes works in with Trial of Stone. With Trial of Stone, you're also getting the card draw out of that as well. So it's every card or every sort of thing I'm thinking about in this deck is basically I want to get more cards out of it. So the equipment gets me cards, Trial of Stone gets me cards, and Choice of Brutality gets me cards. So I'm always looking for that card advantage. And if I've got 5, 6 more cards than the opponent, and I can cast, and I've got the Echo to cast or to bring the units on board, then I'm going to win the game.
Solid. I don't think I have anything to add. I think that's excellent. Like it's already just a really good, like out of the blue damage card as well. You know, you got somebody who's survived a mauling by one of your units, but the skin of their 3 health or something. And you're like, well, this you know, this whatever, this 3 cost unit, this crossbowman or the shaman is just getting hurled directly at your face.
This is definitely not a super common circumstance, but the other day I was playing Ingor and I played a Choice of Brutality and I banished a Flesh Ripper and I was standing on Starcast Halls, so like 2 cost 6 damage felt crazy, and then draw a card afterward is even crazier. But Ethan, your selection for a unique card is the Ring of Vitality.
Wasn't Ingor's thing when you put things into your graveyard, not when you banish them?
Yeah, but
things are killed.
It's when it goes into the discard pile, but the draw card from the like.
Oh yeah, you do get the draw. Sorry, cut that out. I just had a brain fart. I was like, what?
No, I'm keeping that in.
Yeah, it's two different abilities here.
Yeah. Anyway, so Ring of Vitality is a 3-cost item. This unit gains Regeneration 3. Whenever you activate this unit, it recovers 3 health. This is a pretty unconventional pick. I don't think I've ever seen someone bring Ring of Vitality before. But give me the defense.
It looks really good on Auric when you're playing him really defensively. It helps if you've got like a True Stone and a Knight and this on Auric, and Auric's the guy out there taking the hits. You can really, really start to mitigate what your opponent's doing. It's an item. It's one of those items where I would never take it in a million years if it was anybody but Auric. But specifically because it is Auric, and you can actually get it for reduced cost if you whatchamacallit. If you play Call to Arms, you can just grab it. It's like, yep, well, that's mine, and I get a card.
Yeah, at that point,
It's
it could be one echo.
yeah, exactly. Because you're going to be on Starcast. It's one of those things. A lot of the gold items, I think, even with the change today, are a little hard to justify sometimes. But Auric does want to get in there, and he does want to take some hits. And as tough as he is, nobody's immune to focus fire. And I have had games where my opponent would have killed him dead, and like that, he was like my one relic holder, and I just would have been foobar if he died. But because of this relic, or this item rather, I can keep going. Like he'll get a ton of longevity. If your opponent can't, your opponent's already going to have to pour a lot of resources into Auric. Is my point. He's already a big, tough, strong guy with access to protections and 20 health. And if you can give him regen 3 every round, there's going to be a lot of matchups where your opponent's just like, well, I can't even do it. And they have to stop trying. And they have to redirect their stuff. And at that point, Auric can just hammer away. So yeah, I don't think it's a super popular card. I don't think it has like a ton of utility outside of Auric, even now, honestly. But I think specifically, it's what you put on him and then like one offensive thing.
I think with the new rules, you might see it a bit more, because
Mhm.
one of the hard tasks about this one is that up till now you were giving your opponent 3 mastery when your unit died with it on board. So you've now got Auric who can now play this, and ultimately you're not losing mastery for it, and he can reforge it.
Yup. It's like if there's a break in the fighting, if you killed what you were fighting, you're sitting there, maybe you blew it up so you could reduce some incoming damage. Now you're down to like 7 health. And you're like, well, I don't want Arc to move this round. I'm getting it back.
You can
It's good
also move
stuff.
it. You can move it between between different units as well, so you can get it to the unit you need it on.
Exactly. If your True Stone's been taking hits for the rest of the team, you can hand it over.
Okay, I might be convinced. Stuart, do you play Ring of Vitality currently, or is it something that you're thinking about now with the change?
It's actually something I've been playing in the last couple of months, and one of the reasons for that is I was at the local club that I play at, which is called Dice Grounds in Kilmarnock. What we actually I was running an event where I was inviting people to come along, and if they came to 3 events over the space of about 5 weeks, I would actually give them a seeker deck, and let them keep it. So you got a seeker deck along with the standees for it, because I had a stack of them. I ended up, I bought all of this stuff, and I discovered I don't really need to use it because I'm playing Auric all the time anyway, and I've got enough of the cards to actually be able to peel anything I want anyway. So I said, okay, I'll just run this kind of event. And because of that, I was having a lot of people were coming along who are beginners, who are playing with seeker decks. So to even the playing field a little bit, what I did was I just made a slightly improved seeker deck for Auric, which is based off of his own seeker deck, and it comes with Ring of Vitality. So I've been playing with that for the last couple of months, and it does give you an appreciation for how good it can actually be. It's niche. It doesn't come up in every game, but being honest, it's when it does come up, it is very useful. And I think the rules change now, because you're not giving away that 3 mastery. It's more than adequate now. I mean, 3 healing every time you activate, and if you get something like Second Wind, if you've got Decree of Volcaris, which is not a spell I actually rate that highly, but you've also got the
Endless
Endless
Rage.
Rage. You got
Yeah.
all of these. You're getting double benefit out of it. You can also, and it's similar to if you actually look at the moving ahead a little bit. If you look at some of the relics, it's like that I've chosen. It leans into a similar idea.
Yup.
Fair enough. Before we move on to talking about some relics, are there any cards that you feel like are terrible and should never make the cut?
Ooh.
Yes, Death Undone absolutely is probably one of the worst cards ever, because it just seems to be like, I've just had a unit die, and I'm going to spend 2 echo to the back of my hand where I can play it next round. I'd rather just draw another unit.
Yeah,
So it's like, why would I spend 2 echo to play the unit I just had killed?
I've never played this card and been happy about it. Uh, just playing with basic Seeker decks, this is one of those ones where it's like, oh my god, really?
The other one I would also say, which is actually I think is something that's rated by some people, including by people in this podcast, is Decree of Ocaris, because
Yeah. Uh-huh.
that one expensive for what you get for it. If you can get it to line up, it's absolutely fantastic. It can be a game winner,
Mhm.
and in that respect, it can actually be handy to have in your deck, because you can turn around games with it. But anytime I've tried playing with it, it's become a bid card.
I don't think it's something I would ever take in Auric, I should say. I think it has a place in Sigrith, in part because I don't think that Auric has a ton of use for a lot of gold units. There are a couple that I take, but Sigrith takes, like, I think, in my opinion, like all of the golds for yellow. Whereas with like Auric, it's like, well, a lot of them are reds, and reds have got mixed bag when it comes to golden units. And he just doesn't need them a lot of the time. I feel like, especially like if you pull a bunch of golds for your opening hand for Auric, you're like, God damn it, I wanted some echo generation. I wanted some card pull. So I would agree that it's probably not a good fit for Auric, even as somebody who likes the card.
One card that I want to mention that, at least before today, has been pretty abysmal is Barter. So this is a one-cost channel spell that allows you to search your deck for an item and reveal it, and then you can return an item that you own that's in play and return that to your hand, or sorry, to your deck. And then you get to play the item that you searched for without spending any echoes. So you basically get to switch an item that you have in play with one in your deck. Um, this has been like really bad for a while.
It's
Um,
been awful. It's been totally awful.
is it still awful?
I'm not sure that it is now still awful. I mean, I can see a use for it now, but previously, I mean, what you're talking about when you're talking about even at zero cost, if you're casting it on Starcast halls, what you're doing is you're just delaying, because ultimately what you're doing is you're taking one card, you're swapping some equipment, and generally, because of until the recent rule change, you're only usually playing one or two pieces of equipment, maybe three at most. So you're not actually going to be able to benefit from it, because even at most you'd maybe have like Ring of Vitality, Horns, Helmet, maybe Scoundrel's Blade, or Peril Gauntlet, something like that. You're not going to trade off your Ring of Vitality for a weaker piece of equipment. And you're not going to trade off a horned helmet for Peril Gauntlets. You maybe trade the other way to get the +1 from the horned helmet. But how often is that going to come up? And if it does come up, what are you getting from it? You're just basically getting an extra card. You're spending a card to get a card. That just delays your game. That you're losing tempo at that point, and that's where it becomes a really bad matchup. However, now that we've got the lack of mastery, when you're losing the equipment, you can now see. I could now see like a deck coming in where maybe somebody has 9, 10 pieces of cheap equipment, like Gordrinker's Axe, Amulet of Vitality, Great Shield, all of these kind of things, and swapping them out. So if you're turning around and you've got a great shield, you keep yourself alive for a little bit, you get to half health, and all of a sudden you can barter and get in a Gordrinker's Axe. Now you get +2 damage because you're now berserk. So you can now suddenly change that that kind of thing. And you can have, it doesn't matter that you're going to destroy all this equipment in the end, because you're not going to give the mastery to your opponent. If you did that before, that's 10 mastery to your opponent.
I do see the utility now. I don't know if I'd risk it though, because it's so much investment for just a card that's like I
I don't know.
don't know.
I'm actually kind of convinced. Stuart, you mentioned earlier that you played Magic. I played Magic for quite some time, and one of my favorite decks was this mono white equipment deck built around a guy named SRAM. And he basically says whenever you play like a equipment card, you get to draw a card. So very similar to what Auric is working with. And or sorry, no, it's just whenever you play an artifact, I think. Um, but you just fill the deck with super cheap artifacts. And you play one, you draw a card, you play another, you draw a card. If you have enough things to reduce the cost of your equipment, then you're just playing zero cost cards and drawing more cards. And eventually you'll finish it with some kind of crazy combo. But I think that now it feels pretty feasible to do something similar with Auric because you don't get that, one shot combo potential. But if barter is, if you're standing on the terrain and it's just zero cost, draw a card, effectively now you're playing a 27 card deck. And if you're playing a bunch of equipment that, it starts out as just being one cost, you destroy it to add a 2 damage or prevent 2 damage, and then you get that one echo back, then you have this deck full of just super efficient cards.
Yeah, you're also
And
getting the echo coming back as well, because
right,
it costs you 0 and you're getting 1 echo. As well as that,
exactly.
you've got the equipment to do that. Previously, before, that tactic didn't work because you were just giving your opponent mastery.
Right. And now you can just cycle through. So you'd have a few cards that you want to see every game, whereas most decks in this game can't do that consistently. I could see this version of Auric. Yeah. If you want to see Rogarth the Breaker every single game, you can basically guarantee that if you play enough card draw.
It's a
And
brave
Anyway,
new world.
as well as that, you can guarantee getting specific pieces of kit. I mean, as an example, one of the best pieces of kit to get onto Rogarth was Scout boots.
mhm,
So if you got a piece of equipment, it didn't matter whether which of the 5 basic pieces of equipment you've got. If you've got that on board, you can turn around and use barter to go and get a pair of Scout boots.
yep.
So specific combos come in, and similarly, if you've got, for example, if you've got Horned Helmet, Feral Gauntlets, and if you're playing a lot of basic units, which very often I'm doing, you've also got the Umberland Lantern, which is a 3 cost piece of equipment, and you can swap out like a 2 cost piece of equipment for the 3 cost to put Umberland Lantern onto a piece of a unit, and you can put it on any unit, and you can also put them onto units that are engaged, which is something Call to Arms has now been called out that we cannot do. So you can actually now put equipment onto units that are engaged using solely this card, or Reforge you can do it with as well. So you can actually turn around and like catch your opponent out, because if you've got a unit that's close to death and you put a Goredrinker's Axe on it, all of a sudden that's doing +2 damage, and you can stop yourself on the round that you're about to die by destroying the equipment. So you've got 4 health left and you've got a crossbowman, and if you can do 4 attacks, you will do +2 damage on every attack. So that's 7 damage on each attack. And then you just, on the 4th attack, you just turn around and say, that's it. I'm destroying the equipment, so you don't take the damage from recoil.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some relics now. Um, One key thing, as always, the boots are very good, and each hero wants to play them. So we just kind of put them in the honorable mentions and don't talk about them further, at risk of it just being a top 2 list. Another honorable mention that Stuart has put down is the Trapjaw Chain. But let's talk about our top 3. So starting at third place, we've got the Fang of the Damned. So this relic gives, once during this unit's activation, it may suffer 3 damage to perform a free attack If this attack scores a hit, the unit recovers 5 health. So what's so important about the Fang here?
If you're playing with them, very often, if you've got like the horned helmet, or you've got particularly the feral gauntlets, you want to land 2 attacks in your activation. Now you're not guaranteed to get 2 attacks on each round. So the best idea to try and do that is to just get additional attacks. So if you get Fang of the Damned, that allows you to get like a basic 3 attacks each round. If you've got that on a Status Battlemaster, that could be 4 attacks. And if you've got equipment on board, that's just multiplying up, because each time you're doing an attack, you're getting additional benefit from your equipment. And if you get 2 pieces of equipment, that might even be +2 damage. So again, these all just add up. Fang of the Damned could get you +6 damage on that round.
Also gives you some healing.
Yep. This is if you land the attack, that is. But that's assuming you do. And if you did, you might, and if you get Feral Gauntlets, that could even be an additional 3 damage on top of it as well.
Scary.
All right, in second place, we've got the Martyr's Vexillium. I think this might be the first time that we're talking about this relic. Uh, this unit may absorb damage that would be dealt to an ally within 3 inches. Damage exceeding this unit's health is dealt to the original target. And while other allies are within 3 inches, they gain regeneration 2. So whenever you activate this unit, it will recover 2 health.
You've got as well as that, you're also talking about units within 3 inches. Very often, if you're playing Auric, you want to have some form of protection nearby, like Two Stone Exemplar or Knights of Ocaris. If you have them nearby and you put one of these on it, not only are you regenerating on that unit, you're regenerating on your own unit, on Auric or whatever unit happens to be nearby. But as well as that, you can move this about. So if you've got, like, for example, even just a priest sitting behind you can put this on the priest, and the priest now becomes a knight, and it can take the damage off of the units within 3 inches, and it can regenerate. If it gets down to 2 health, you just pass it on to somebody else, and then you let them take on board the responsibility of being the protector. So it can really absorb allow you to absorb a lot of damage, and also let you regenerate a lot of damage if you've got a few units nearby.
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, I like playing all turtled up, and this can be, as long as you can keep the thing in the center alive, this can be a great option for just being like, yeah, everybody gets to regen. You're never going to move us.
Put that on a True Stone Exemplar. I mean, I know that the True Stone Exemplar can still absorb damage within an inch, but this also extends that out to 3 inches as well. So
Mhm.
that actually helps you to do that, and that unit can stay alive for quite some time, especially with regeneration 2 on the unit, which means that you don't need the Ring of Vitality. So I'll go back to what I said about the Ring of Vitality. It can really keep things alive. If you get regeneration 2 on Auric, that can get you another couple of activations potentially, or at least a couple more attacks out of them. And a couple more attacks out of Auric can be like 14 plus damage.
Yep.
I really love this relic. It was one that I was pretty low on. I think when I made like my first ever relic tier list, it was like D tier, down at the bottom, right next to the cloak. But I ended up there was a game that I played with Polynor, and the relic display was just not great overall, and so I ended up taking this, and actually I think it may have just been like a draw off the top, and I was very disappointed at first. But if you just pass it around, like I was switching it between some belly boys, and like the 3 inch protection radius, that's gonna get every unit that you want it to get. There's no like awkward positioning that you have to try and do to get people to fit. It's just gonna work. And being able to pull damage onto units that usually wouldn't be able to, like you mentioned a priest, they're just gonna sit in the back normally and pray and heal. But being able to use that extra health as a little health battery is something that can really help the survivability of what would otherwise just be a normal game.
Two of the
Uh,
best units I've seen them going on to is the first one is Spirit Shaman, because Spirit Shaman can also heal itself. And very often you want them sitting in the back just to sit there and take pot shots at things as well. And the second thing, or battle cry, and the second thing that you can actually do with with it is if you can get that on Sectacar and have Sectacar just lob bombs over the top of you, he's got quite a good health pool, so you can actually sit and have shaman support or priests supporting him, keeping him alive, and he can just absorb the damage.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, at our number one spot, we have a relic that we have talked about quite a few times now, and that is the Reaper's Edge. So this unit gains melee expert 2 while performing a melee attack. This unit gets +2 power. Essence Binder 3. Whenever an enemy is defeated during this unit's activation, you gain 3 echo. And non-secret enemies defeated by this unit are banished.
Easily one of the best relics in the game for Auric, in my opinion. The additional damage alone is just enough for it, because the amount of attacks that Auric will put out, and or an Astaris Battlemaster will put out for that matter, is just simply it's insane, because you've got Trial of Stone, which will get you net you usually 2 attacks. You've got the Rebound and Throw, which will get you an attack, although that doesn't really get affected by this so much because it's ranged a ranged attack. But you can also get the Valorous Command, Adrenaline Rush, Endless Rage, Unstoppable Rush. All of these spells will go towards getting additional attacks, and anything that does additional damage on your melee, then that's going to help. Another spell which I mentioned on my an aside on the elite spells was Rush of Salvation, which if you can turn around and you can get Rush of Salvation, pull off like a move with Auric to bring him up, take some damage, absorb the damage from whatever hit it is. You've moved Auric 10 inches up the board, or 14 inches if you've got scout boots on. And then you can actually get him in close. But if you've got this relic on board, then you're potentially now in place to land 2 attacks straight off the bat without actually having to actually move up, which is, you can do serious damage in those situations.
Absolutely. It's almost superfluous. Like I'm thinking that maybe at some point we just give up and be like, yeah, this is like the boots. Like Reaper's Edge is too good. It's so universally applicable and excellent on everybody. But at the same time, most of the seekers, like I thought it was good on Polynor because of the ranged access to Essence Binder. Like I think maybe it's interesting because it's good on everybody, but the ways in which it's good are like different between the seekers, and it kind of gives you insight into their general play style by the way that the Reaper's Edge fits into it.
Yeah, and the echo generation is always going to be useful, because especially if you're drawing into more cards and you can spend echo on, then this is going to help you spend that echo.
Yup.
I mean, in that kind of deck, Auric's your main beat stick. And so if you can get it onto Auric, then you're going to get a lot of echo from the damage you're going to cause, because the amount of attacks you can get. Especially if you get scout boots on him, you can actually, because if you can maybe kill a unit or two, it becomes like thunder steps, and he can actually start running about the board and killing off the weaker units.
Yup.
Any other thoughts on relics in general?
I like the Aegis. I think it's good
Yeah.
for. It's like a weaker version of the Vexillum.
Yep.
Like it's good for the same reasons.
In fact, I've actually got like an idea, sort of moving forward, that the Guardian's Aegis might actually be a very handy one to have if you can get the Codrinker's Axe, which, as I've said earlier, with the new rules, is something that I might actually look into trying to fit into a deck, especially with barter. And so I can run a lot of weaker equipment, and then you get to half health with Auric, so you're 10 health, and then all of a sudden you're now hitting for 7 damage, just naturally because of Berserk. And then you turn around and you put a Guardian's Aegis on it, you're not taking any damage from the recoil.
We should maybe read out the Gore Drinker's Axe real quick.
Core Drinker Axe is a 1-cost item. This unit gains Recoil 1 whenever this unit resolves an attack, deal 1 damage to it, and Berserk 2 while this unit's health is lower than or equal to half its health. It gains +2 power.
Gives a disincentive to people that want to attack Auric.
Fair enough.
It's kind of the like Thundersteps problem of like, do you actually want to hit him a bunch of times? And if so, can you finish him off before he hits you back?
Maybe except Auric has counter attack.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's
All right.
almost like giving vengeance and retribution to Thundersteps.
Yep. Makes them even gnarlier. Alrighty. Let's keep going.
Well, yeah, let's talk about some matchup stuff. So before we start talking about some Stuart's experience, we have some input from our stats gremlin. It looks like Auric has a very high win rate, 75%, with 4 games played into both Liena and Londrel, and a 66.67% win rate into Vorendal. He's got an even 50-50 with both Syrath and Thundersteps, and a low win rate of 33.3% into Polynor, and a 0% win rate into both Ingor and Morida. There are no games recorded for Griza versus Auric. Does this kind of reflect your own experience, Stuart? And then as a follow-up question into some of your good matchups, what are the strategies that you employ that make them feel powerful?
Ultimately, I'm probably close to what's similar to this, but most of the games I played against Ingor have won, if not all of them, as far as I can remember. The ones I played against Countess Morida, I won every game against Countess Morida. Polynor is probably the weakest matchup. That I would definitely agree with that, because the burst damage can actually catch you very, very quickly. And once you start losing units off the board and you're left with very few activations, Auric being the only unit on board, for example, is not a good thing. So I've seen myself getting caught out with that quite a few times. I've also won a few against Polynor, but probably less than 50%. So it's probably the single weakest matchup that I think I've come up against. Thundersteps, I've never. Sorry, I did lose once against Victus. Lawrence, we actually he ran a tournament down in Newcastle. I travelled down to go and visit it, and we sort of played in the final, and he beat me in the final in round 2. I'll just say I didn't particularly get the draw I was looking for that day, but it happens. I ended up drawing, I think it was a Valkyrie's Priest, Spirit Shaman, and a Warfront Commander. So it's pretty much support units and no meat. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. Syrath, I've never lost to Syrath yet. Vorendal, never lost to Vorendal yet. Londrel, I've lost a couple of matches, but I've played quite a lot against Londrel, but pretty much won most of them. And I've not actually played against Liena yet.
Fair enough. Into those weaker matchups, are there any cards that you include in your sideboard to help you out?
Yep, one of the things I'm sort of starting to do with Polynor is to actually take a lot of the damage mitigation spells you would normally see in Syrath. So things like Ward of Volcaris. I'm also taking in some more. I've sort of leaned into Pat from Seekers of the Malediction. He's actually sort of leaned into doing the right hold custodian to try and mitigate against range attacks, which is something that you frequently get with Polynor. And as well as that, you've also got I also lean in a bit into more range. So as an example, I very often I'll have side decked the sector car and Farsight ambushers. So I can actually sort of lean into almost a gunline type game where you've got 3 crossbowmen, 2 Farsight ambushers, sector car, spirit shaman, and Valkyrie's priests, all as range units. So that's the majority of your board is actually range units, and then you're using like people like Auric just basically as for sweeping up the board for any melee they get through your gun line, or alternatively that's one of the few times when I'm using Reforge, where I'm wanting to get things like horned helmets out to the range units so that I can use those range units to push units back rather than having them running in on me. So they can also work with swarm units as well.
Ethan, do these stats and sideboard decisions kind of match your experience with the more defensive approach, or do you have any new opinions to share?
I don't know. I've been banging away at Auric for the last couple weeks, but I don't. He's kind of weird in that like he takes a little bit more setup, and I don't think a lot of people, at least that I've played, have been like very used to going up against him. So I feel like I don't really have the right frame of reference because I don't know. A lot of the people I played have just been like, "Whoa, what Auric?" Like it's been kind of inconsistent. I will say the bad matchups have been stuff like Polynor, where they could just burn you down from range. But that's kind of true with stuff like Syrath as well, you know. So I don't know. I don't feel like I've played him enough, and I don't think I've played him consistently enough to really give my 2 cents on this.
One of the
Fair enough.
games I played against Polynor, I actually managed to take Polynor out as a consolation prize because I actually charged across the board and managed to get straight in, and I killed him in one turn. It was Auric was on 1 health, and I managed to charge in, landed the charge, then did Trial of Stone, landing 3 attacks on Polynor um, because of like counter attack and also destroying some equipment to prevent damage. It was one of the weirdest sort of. No, sorry, it wasn't quite. It was just 2 attacks because on the first attack in, so I managed to actually get to draw the extra card from Trial of Stone as well. So I managed to kill him that way. That was one of
Nice.
a weird one. So it was a consolation prize, but as I say, I still lost that game.
Was that our game a couple months ago in the TTS tournament?
It was indeed.
Yeah, this was a hilarious kind of outcome because I mean the beginning of the game was completely one-sided. Stuart played a few units early, and I just had like all 3 twin flames or something like that, and just blew him up before any engagement happened. And then on the second to last round of the game, it was literally just Auric left alive. He comes charging in and just obliterates Polynor. Like I was not expecting, like I was expecting a sweet mastery differential, and I mean, almost evened us out.
Oh, I had no units
Uh,
at the end of that one though.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was still a brutal game, but I don't think I've ever lost Polynor that quickly.
It was one. It was literally 1 round, because I can't even remember what caused the initial damage, but it was the charge done some damage, and then the Trial of Stone did the finishing. Either that or I took him down from like full health down to 0 and just to 2 attacks. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but Polynor went down very quickly.
Yeah, I think there may have been like a tiny bit of damage. Like maybe you had thrown an item at him on like a previous round or something. But I mean, we're talking minimal damage, and like maybe you got sniped by a priest or something like that. Or it just came blistering in and did most of the dirty work. But anyway, let's say hypothetically you've just moved to Scotland and you've been paired up against Stuart in your first round. How do you beat Auric? What are some strategies that I guess when you're playing Auric tend to work very well against you?
First thing I would do is you want to shut down echo generation. So anytime you see primal totems or Valkyrus priests on the board, concentrate on them to get them off the board. If you ignore them at your peril, because if they can start generating echo, then each time that the Auric's drawing those extra cards, you're going to get them played against you the next round. And so you can end up, it's like that amount of card advantage and that amount of unit advantage can end up losing you the game very, very quickly because you're out activated. You've got a lot of health generating on the board, and you've got a lot of units generating on the board. And ultimately, you got to stop that at its source. And the only way you're going to do that is by denying echo. And to deny the echo, you've got to kill the units that are going to do that. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is you want to keep Auric at range. Never let Auric get anywhere near anything that you hold near and dear, and that includes your seekers, Because if Auric can fight on his terms and get in there and make the attacks first, he's going to make it hard for a Seeker to actually kill you. I mean, as an example, I was playing Vorendal earlier on this week, and Vorendal with completely fresh health, and I just went in, stood there, did my 2 attacks, managed to get him into range, did my 2 attacks, did Trial of Stone, took some damage, got to draw a card, and then he did an onslaught. He was dead on the first attack. So his onslaught went nowhere because the counter attack killed him.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm like, oh, I still think seekers that have good access to range are going to be trouble for you. Back like literally just yesterday, I would have said, oh, take Polynor and put 3 shatters into his deck from your sideboard. But now I don't know, man.
Shatters aren't as good as you'd think they are, and especially the fact that you can actually now destroy the equipment a lot more easily.
Yeah, and like originally for shatters, like I was honestly mainly playing them for the points. It's like you're just gonna nickel and dime the Auric into giving you like 10 points over the course of a whole game if you keep at it. But now that they don't give you points, all bets are off. I agree with everything Syrath said or Stuart said. Just like keep him away, man. Keep him away. Control him. Stuff like TK is always going to be golden. If you can get his stuff out of position so that it's not protecting each other, you can go at it and focus something down. It's kind of the same playbook with stuff like Sigrith and Thundersteps kind of smashed together. Kind of makes sense if you think about it.
And watch out for rebounding throws.
Yup.
Don't let him charge your Seeker.
Yeah, there's that too. Again,
That's
you can get a lot of attacks out on one round, especially with Trial of Stone. You think it's only going to be 1 attack coming in, and you're wrong. It's sometimes 3 attacks.
Yup.
Mhm. And then, Ethan, you have a few notes here about like your more defensive build.
Ah, yes. Sorry. The other thing is that, like I said, I think, especially if you don't like pulling Taric beasts, which is regrettable, happens sometimes, you are, as an Auric player, you are often only going to have 1 relic. Maybe 2 if you're lucky, but plan on 1. And if everything goes to your favor, you can protect that 1 relic unit and you can kill something else and you can start build up momentum. But if your opponent can pick out whatever's got the relic and kill it, and at least contest, if not grab that relic, then you just kind of lose. It can take all the wind out of your sails. And like any other big scary seeker, like your Vorendals and your Thundersteps, if you can kill him dead, that is a ton of momentum. It's going to swing in your direction very quickly. And you're just going to be dealing with early game Auric specifically. You are going to be dealing with a much smaller barrier for, sorry. With early game Auric, you are going to be dealing with a much slimmer barrier for failure. If a couple of your things die and your opponent can get, like, God forbid, like all 4 of the relics, your relic control is going to be weak early game, is my point. And if your opponent can capitalize on that, then you're in trouble.
One of the ways you can mitigate against that, though, is by use of Spirit Shaman and Warfront Commandos, because those units will get you a lot of distance on the board. So if you even battle cry 1 unit, just 1 move, that's enough to get further. Packs of
Absolutely.
Scorehorn are also fast moving and can pick up husks, so they can get the relics as well. And very
Well, yeah,
often,
okay, but we're talking about bad things about her.
yeah, but that's if you're limited to 1, then totally that's where you're going to fall down. If you can only get 1 relic in the first round, because very often you don't play Auric turn 1, you play him turn 2.
Mm-hmm. You have
Whoever
all the
yeah
same limitations.
whoever grabbed the husk, whoever grabbed the relic is going to usually hand it off to Auric.
Yeah, you have the same limitations kind of as any other dual faction seeker in like the first 2 rounds, where they are just not going to have the same amount of resources as the
It's
mono faction seekers.
similar to Thundersteps, well, although Thundersteps does have a bit more range with some of the units as well.
Mm.
All right. Any final notes on Auric in general?
He's cool. He should put on a shirt though.
Why would you want to do that? I actually made up a deck and I called it 8 Bearded Buff Dudes because you've got Cabra Maulers, you've got the Astaris Battle Masters, you've got 2 Stone Exemplars, and you got Auric himself. So you get 8 Volkir, and at least 4 of them are shirtless.
Excellent. He's neat. I think he kind of shows off the design space of a dual faction seeker. He's got kind of a weird gimmick that a lot of the game didn't, at least until recently, didn't really engage with very much. He takes a bit more doing to get set up. He needs some specific stuff, but there's nothing else like him. And your opponent is going to have to deal with stuff from red and yellow that are like both going to be, maybe they could handle one, maybe they could handle the other, but can they handle both at once?
I would also go as far as to say as well that with Auric, that he's probably the most combo seeker of the game. I don't think there's many. I mean, yes, you can do it with like pollen on and things like that, but to actually pull off some of the kind of more complex combos that you can get with Auric, you can totally have so much fun. Horned helmet, throwing equipment at people, doing charges in when you're not expected, um, and things like that. It can like catch people off guard. So it's like having that kind of fun in the. I mean, it's not the strongest seeker in the game. There's by far it's whether it is now, I don't know, but certainly before it wasn't the strongest seeker in the game. But it's certainly a fun one to play.
Yeah, I'd say like that's kind of the thing we've been coming back to is the combos. You can do this and then this. And a lot of the combos aren't going to waste your resources as much as they would with other seekers because you can reforge and you can bring items back. And it's kind of it's not as limited of a resource for you.
All right. Well, with all of that being said, let's move into some hot takes. So, for our final section of the podcast, we love it when our community members will submit some hot takes or community questions. I've got nothing this week. I had a few submissions for some future episodes, but nothing to get me prepared for today. So these are coming from my own heart. So, number 1, pizza is a sandwich.
Ooh, getting philosophical. Well, I think that if you go back to the history, like the Earl of Sandwich, that like English guy who invented sandwiches, they were traditionally open-faced. They were not closed-faced. So you don't even have to go so far as to say that the cheese is the upper half of the bread. You could just say that they are open-faced sandwiches if you really wanted to twist the knife.
Yep, I completely agree. It's definitely a sandwich. It's like you've got bread there. It's like you've got like something in the middle of it. You've got like the equivalent of tomato sauce. You've got cheese. You've got meat. You've got so yeah. I mean, other than the pineapple, yeah, I would say you've got a sandwich there.
Yeah, I didn't expect that to be so positive. Usually people are pretty upset about that.
Well,
I
if you think about it, there's not really much difference between most animals besides, like, we're all made out of the same parts. It's just kind of how we're oriented. It's the same principle.
I just got a last second submission from my lovely fiance who just burst into the room and showed me on her phone, when people are in a hot tub, it is a people soup.
Mm. I don't know. I think I'd have to dissolve, or at least have parts of me come off for me to consider that.
Yeah, there's no broth. It's just water.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
It's
want to
it's
you don't want
like
to pass Stitch Corpse in there.
Yeah, exactly.
oh.
And at least you'd have like what would that be, like formaldehyde based broth more than anything?
It's like you know what they said. It's like the leopard that failed his driving test because he left his foot in the accelerator.
Well, I'd say that the lack of hot takes about Auric kind of belays that, like, he hasn't been much played up until pretty recently.
Yeah.
And people haven't really. And he's not as simple. Like with Thundersteps, you could be like, this is the case, or this is the case. With Auric, it's like, well, he's got a gimmick. He has the thing he generally does. You can kind of expound on it in different ways. Eh, who knows?
As I said, it's what attracted me to him. Not many people played him.
Hmm.
Yeah. And both of you guys have had some very different deck building decisions. We haven't had a whole lot of Seekers that we've discussed so far where you have such drastic changes between the different deck lists.
I mean,
Like,
I played aggro all the way through to kind of elite units, combo decks, you name it, equipment decks. Although equipment decks up until probably maybe what now, but back then it was like I tried an experiment where I was working with like 12 pieces of equipment. Didn't work very well because ultimately, as I say, you ended up just giving mastery to your opponent.
Well, I gotta say, like half of the cards you mentioned, Stuart, like were not in my list at all. But at the same time, when you explained how they worked, I was like, oh yeah, that would absolutely work. I think some of the dual faction seekers have this problem where it's like, okay, you can draw from both of these colors, but a lot of those colors aren't really designed for them at all. And you really should be playing a very specific way with very specific choices from these two colors. And while I think Auric likes things, I think Auric has a very broad range of stuff he can make better, in part because he's all about augmenting the stuff that you bring.
I mean, with the new expansion coming in, we've also got four new pieces of equipment coming in. What
No.
change is that going to make to the equations when it comes to actually working out decks? And that's one of the things I actually also like about it, because regardless of whatever secret you go and play, you don't have that ability to actually be able to sort of diversify your deck based on equipment. You could play Umberland Lantern. That's a defensive deck. You can play with reinforced plates. That's a defensive deck. You can play with Horned Helmet and Feral Gauntlets. That's offensive. You can play with Ring of Vitality. Again, maybe not defensive. That's actually just keeping yourself alive. Again, it's like there's so many different ways you can play it, depending on which equipment you can bring in. Now that they've actually opened that up, that's going to completely change Auric moving forward, I think, and it's going to make a massive difference to how we see him being played, and I think we'll see a lot of variety in the decks that come out.
That well, as they say in the fluff, the will of the forge is mainly an instrument of creation. You get to build things. You get to do a little bit of like faction building with Auric. You get to kind of build yourself up. It's not just plug and play. It's cool for that.
And what I'm actually looking forward to, and I would like to see this happen eventually, is that if they do the equipment right, that you actually have a Swiss Army knife side deck that's basically all equipment, and you swap out the equipment that's best for your matchup. So as an
I can see
example,
that.
yeah, so you could actually have maybe something that's maybe gives defense against spells. So you bring that in against Pollen or against Leanna, or something that you've got like range, like that helps you with range, and that'll help you with like going up against range units, or you've got like AoE like abilities, like a piece of equipment that explodes. So something like provides Secticar's bombardment, something like that could you could see that coming into the game. You can imagine that throwing that onto a unique unit or a unique piece of equipment onto a unit, and then starting to throw bombs.
I think we're just scratching the surface. I think it's only going to get better and better. Stuff comes out, people are really going to crack them wide open. At least I can hope.
Yeah, whether it'll happen that way, I don't know, but we'll see.
I have one last take, and this might be the coldest one of the evening because we've already kind of been discussing it throughout the day in the Critical Grays channel where we do our recordings. But I feel like the change to equipment, we've talked about how it's going to affect Auric a lot. I don't think that it's going to affect all of the Seekers, the rest of them, as nearly as much. I think that, starting today, we're going to see a pretty sharp increase in equipment that gets played. And over time, that is going to trend back down. And I think that's going to be for a couple of reasons. I think, people are going to be excited to play more equipment in their decks. But I think that they're going to realize very quickly that, you know, even though your opponent is not getting the mastery, equipment is not a replacement for a unit in your deck. It's more akin to a replacement for a spell. It's going to add a little bit of extra damage or a little bit of movement potential, but it does not have the same health pool or action economy that a unit is going to provide. And so I think that Auric benefits a lot because the synergy of his legacy and kind of by extension his entire deck, is built around these equipment cards. But no other Seeker in the game kind of has that built-in synergy. We'll have a few Seekers that can use maybe one or two different pieces of equipment very well. Stuff like the gloves in Vorendal, or horned helmet, or the bow in Polynor. But aside from those, kind of one-off instances, I really don't think that equipment are going to be like. I think this is a very good change. That's a step in the right direction. But I don't think it solves the problem that equipment have. What do you
And I
guys think?
totally agree with that. And ultimately, if you're looking at the things that you've already got, they've already worked out what equipment works well with what decks. As an example, putting a Numberland Lantern on an Armored Revenant, or putting it onto a basic unit in Syrath to get the Divine Retribution to trigger. All these things have already been worked out. So you're not going to get any more efficient than the things that are already being worked out already. So it's just going to make those ones more common. I don't think it's going to bring in like new things to the game. One of the things that we were talking about earlier is that Athan, which is one of the units that has been spoiled for the next expansion, is going to work brilliantly with Goredrinker's Axe. But that was always going to be the case. The mastery was never going to come into that. So it's not going to make a change for the other Seekers, but for Auric it's a big thing, because losing 10 mastery to your opponent just by using your legacy, well, that's a relic in itself. So that was enough to actually lose you games, and as a result you had to actually tame back using the legacy for that reason.
Yep. It's really good to see that downside removed.
Alrighty. Well, before we close it out, Stuart, thank you so much for coming on and donating 2 hours of your time. Do you have any final shout-outs or anything that you'd like to mention before we hop off?
No, not too much. I mean, just a mention out to Lawrence, but the Northern Alliance games down in Newcastle, because the two of us so we keep in touch quite a lot, and trying to keep the malediction sort of ticking over in the UK, and trying to run tournaments between the two of us, because he's run one tournament so far. I'm planning to run one, hopefully with the release of the expansion, and he's hoping to come up at that point. So we'll keep your eye out on that, and if anybody else is in the UK, you can reach out to us at all. I mean, I'm Syrath on Discord, and also you can find me on Facebook under Malediction Scotland.
Yeah, and Lawrence is Victus Drake, who was our guest for the Thundersteps episode. So yeah.
One of my few defeats against Thundersteps.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you both for coming on and talking about some Auric action, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.